The City Commission workshop for the City of New Smyrna Beach for Tuesday, November 21st, 2023, Thanksgiving Eve will now come to order. Please join me in silencing your cell phones. To all the faithful, thank you for coming. Happy Thanksgiving. We're delighted to see you. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Perrine.
Here.
Commissioner Martin.
Here.
Commissioner McGurk.
Here.
Commissioner Hartman.
Here.
Mayor Cleveland.
Here.
Thank you.
We'll go right into public participation. So have this special meeting workshop is about our city boards. And so if you have a comment, not a dialogue, but a comment, we'd like to entertain and listen to what you have to say. We'd entertain your remarks before we start our own deliberations. So you'll have 3 minutes to talk. The light on the podium will turn green when you're ready to start. At 1 minute to go, it'll turn yellow, and at the end, it'll turn red. And so for formality and protocol and for the city clerk's records, please name and address when you come forward. Yes, sir. Please come ahead.
I wrote this as 3 minutes, so hopefully it will be. When do I start?
Your name and address, please.
I'm sorry?
Could you
Name and address,
speak your
sir.
name and
Okay,
address?
my name is John Kirk. I live at 7.
And John, raise it right up. There you go.
Sure.
All right,
My
perfect.
voice doesn't go very far.
That's okay. If you talk right into it, everybody at home will be able to hear you.
My name is John Kirk. I live at 760 West 7th Street, New Smyrna Beach, right across from the bus loop at the middle school, which is always an exciting place to live. Greetings to the mayor, commissioners, and valued city staff, and I did write this so I wouldn't ramble. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you in person. I'm a lifelong resident of New Smyrna Beach. My parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents are all buried in the Edgewater Cemetery, and my ancestor, Juan Ginopoli, built the oldest schoolhouse in St. Augustine. Myself and 6 children all went to school locally and also have had several businesses here in the area. I say this to point out that I am invested in this community and I'm concerned with the direction it's going. After many hours of soul searching, I was not going to apply for any city boards. I have been on boards in the past, many years ago, due to the political environment we are currently in and the possible impact it may have on my family. My family thought otherwise and strongly supported my application to the Planning and Zoning Board. There were also about 25 other citizens in our town that also felt compelled to apply for a zoning board position. I am sure they also had long discussions with their family members about whether they agreed with possibly being chosen for an open position and what impact it may have on them. These good citizens are William Anglin, Sean Barrios, Dustin Bell, Anthony Bellione, Thomas Ben, Terry Bledsoe, Teresa Corbett, Frank Dalton, Gary Eliopoulos, Brad Gifford, John Hall, George Kennedy, myself, Dave Lannon, Jeffrey Lawrence, Dave McKenna, Joel Page, Nick Perry, Kyle Sawchuck, Colleen Sharkey, Ralph Stonebreaker, Arthur Von Bulen, Dave Walton, Lisa Willis, and William Yerkes. Pretty long list. I was not able to attend the meeting when the choices were made, and I watched the video from the city website. After watching, I wondered what made those chosen more qualified. I looked at their applications, and many of them had planning and zoning backgrounds, construction, development, etc. I personally do not believe you need a P&Z background, as the accuracy of submissions should be left to city staff, who are the experts to determine if the submission meets the various requirements. I believe that the P&Z board should trust city staff to submit accurate proposals. It should be the P&Z board who determines how this proposal may impact current or future residents. I was very surprised to find that one of the chosen board members was not a resident of New Smyrna Beach and was a registered voter in West Volusia. It was my understanding that a residency requirement was part of the application process. I later found this applicant registered to vote locally after being appointed. The title of New Smyrna Beach is a beachside home, and on his resume, stated in his references that he was a friend of the mayor for 12 years, and the mayor nominated him. The city clerk's office stated that they do not confirm residency, they simply take the applicant's word. If you're not a registered voter in New Smyrna Beach, nor do you have a homestead exemption established with the County of Volusia, how can you be a permanent resident? If that is true, then all of our snowbird residents are eligible for board positions. You have the opportunity to fix this by imposing strict requirements, some as simple as showing valid evidence that you actually live here. Voter registration, homestead exemption, driver's license, etc. It would be very easy to add some qualifiers to the application process and instruct staff to verify the information. Please do not take this as sour grapes, because it's not. I'm not upset about not being chosen. Might be happy about it. I am upset that a non-resident was chosen over the other 24 residents that applied in good faith.
Thank you for your comments, sir.
Okay? And I hope at your workshop, this can be worked out.
Yeah, thank you for your
Thank
comments.
you very much.
Donna Atherin, 684 Corbin Park Road, New Smyrna Beach, also the chairperson for the Turnbull Creek Preservation Board. You will be speaking on our board. Kelly and I have been working together to put together a nice presentation for you about what we have done, what we've accomplished, and where our board needs to go next. Just so that you know I'm here and can answer any questions about what we've done or what we need to do moving forward, I wanted to just let you know of that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your comments. Ms. Dugas, good to see you.
Deborah Dugas, 200 North Pine Street, New Smyrna Beach. I'm just here, I have nothing prepared, so I'm going to be very brief, but I am a firm supporter of the task force and various boards and committees that you all select from residents who are concerned residents. I was on Beachside Task Force many years ago, and we had a group, and what we did, we addressed what those people brought to us, and to me, that's the heart of it. As this gentleman spoke, the residents need to have a voice other than you all and us speaking with you, and I think it's very important, and I think that you do take it seriously with the boards, but I do worry that sometimes the common individual who, I don't have an agenda other than to represent my neighborhood, and I hope that you will put that in the forefront when you do select and decide which board you're going to have. I do think they're very important. I think the residents and the neighborhoods are important. I think the businesses are important. Staff does a tremendous job. I actually read the presentation that was done by staff for this meeting, and I learned so much that I didn't know. I really don't know everything. I know just a little bit, but the staff does a great job of informing people if they will just take advantage of that. And I did think the presentation that you all are going to see and have probably read was fantastic, and my hat's off to city staff. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Wilson, good to see you, sir.
Palmer Wilson, 101 Donlin Drive, New Smyrna Beach. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. While I appreciate and respect the work of the City Clerk and her team does keeping information flowing to the citizens, I have to disagree with her assessment and recommendations regarding the state of our Citizen Review and Advisory Boards as published in tonight's agenda. I do not believe all is as good as is portrayed there. Let me give you an example, and I know this example was changed later on. The clerk sent it to me, but let me read it what it is. This is the Utilities Commission. Prescribes rules, rates, regulations governing the sale and use of electricity, water, gas, and sewage collection treatment. When you looked at the qualifications, even the modified ones that I received later this evening, it doesn't address anything about management, fiscal understanding, or anything else that would relate back to what the priorities or the purpose of that commission is. It's a mismatch, and I think that is an example of some other ones that may also be mismatched. In addition, the term limits are 3 terms of 3 years, so that means if you keep appointing the same person for 3 years, you can have a 9-year mistake on the board. I think that needs to be addressed across the board. The term limits, in my view, may be 2 years max. Airport Authority Advisory Board suggesting we put non-city residents who happen to be flight students and employees on the board doesn't make any sense. What about the affected neighbors of all the flight activities out there? So I think the focus needs to be changed. Another example is the Historic Preservation Board. Because of the changes in state law and the CLG requirements, we have a historic opportunity to change the focus of that board to one that supports citizens in the remodeling of their homes, not becoming an adversary oversight board. I think they could also have a marvelous activity of seeking out foundation support and establishing foundations in order to avoid issues like the recent Women's Club problem that we had. All of that said, I think you have to look at the fact that we need more citizen input. And I don't think just this workshop's enough. I think you need a longer period for citizen input, maybe 2 or 3 months. I think they need to look at things such as reducing term limits, look at the mission statements for qualifications, clarify the legal requirements beyond just mandating by a state law. I don't know what that state law says without looking it up. Does it actually mandate activity or just that you have a board? Ensure broad city zone citizen presence on the boards, encourage submission of resumes, which I think add to the fact for your evaluation, and have boards develop an annual report of activities and accomplishments. Thank you very much. I wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your comments. Anybody else want to address the commission at this time? Seeing none, public participation is now closed. We'll enter into the workshop, and I believe the city clerk has the majority of the heavy lifting here tonight, so we'll open it up with her.
All right, thank you. And good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. At your request, I was asked to share information about each of our official meeting bodies. The requested information was to list each meeting body, including specifics such as the purpose, membership criteria, and establishing resolutions and ordinances, along with recommendations for those meeting bodies. My goal, after showing you my presentation tonight and explaining in detail, is to effectively communicate information to you all regarding the meeting bodies, explaining internal procedures, and making sure that you know what can and cannot be done internally. And end the workshop making sure that you have all of the information that you've requested to assist you in moving forward with making sound decisions that will serve as beneficial for the city, and most of all for our wonderful volunteers that serve on these meeting bodies. So my only request, very politely, is to allow me to present the information and then hold all questions and comments after, if you can. That will allow me to get through this, if that's okay.
Without objection, sure, go right ahead.
All right, so I've split this up. We'll be covering the meeting body definitions and then a meeting body summary of each of the official meeting bodies, proposed direction, procedures, and then recommendations, and then Mayor Cleveland will open the floor for your comments. So meeting body definitions. There are several different types of meetings. We have all of them in our city. We have advisory boards. Meeting frequency is typically quarterly. They serve in an advisory capacity to the governing body, which is City Commission, provide advice that's non-binding to the City Commission, and they're involved with the specific goals or objectives to aid in accomplishing those specific goals. I've listed underneath each of these slides which boards fit into that category so that you can reference that. Airport Advisory Board and the CDBG Board would fall under advisory. Then there is regular boards. They're typically standing. They meet monthly, quarterly, or bi-monthly. They serve advisory or do investigations for the commission designed to provide advice to the City Commission. These are Animal Control Board, Fire Pension Board, Personnel Board, and the Police Pension Board. Commissions or authorities, these are standing and permanent. They meet monthly or quarterly. They may have administrative, quasi-judicial, or advisory powers in accordance with their establishing ordinance. They make decisions on specific matters or make recommendations to the City Commission, and they're involved with ongoing subject areas. Examples of these are the Building Trades Examining Board, Code Compliance Board, Historic Preservation Commission, Housing Authority, and Planning and Zoning Board. Those 5 boards you will find in our Muni Code under our Code of Ordinances. So it's established in our charter/code of ordinances, Muni Code for New Smyrna Beach. Committees are temporary. Their meeting frequency is monthly or quarterly. They serve an advisory capacity. They also typically provide advice, non-binding, to the City Commission. They are also involved in specific goals and objectives. Examples of that would be the CEEC Committee and Turnbull Creek Land Preservation Committee. Task Force are usually not standing bodies. They meet monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly, or as long as the governing body determines. They serve in an advisory capacity, typically providing recommendations to the City Commission. They aid in accomplishing a specific goal, policy, or project. Economic Development Task Force. I added Parking Task Force in here as well because that's a recent example, as well as the Youth Council Task Force. So that explains the different types of meeting bodies that we have in a very brief nutshell. Moving on, I've identified 16 of the boards that we have right now. The ones that are excluded from this, we have 19 total. The 3 that I've excluded from this that are not part of my presentation are meeting bodies composed of elected or appointed officials such as City Commission, CRA, and our canvassing board that we have every election season. So before I get into this, a little background. The clerk's office completed an overhaul of meeting bodies that were temporary and had long outlived their purpose in 2022. All of the sunset meeting bodies had been in existence for over a decade, had long outlived their purpose, and were floundering with the members waiting for an assignment. This caused the members to lose interest, feel devalued, and did not end up serving as beneficial to the governing body, the community, or the members. So we had to make recommendations, and that's the outcome of the recommendations. So, moving on, this gives a brief overview of what was requested. So each board is listed. Under the board name is the establishing resolution or ordinance, and it's listing the purpose, qualifications, member information. I've left a printout at your desk, so if you'd wanted to jot notes down next to it, I can always go back. But I'll just go ahead and briefly slide through these, and you can make any notes that you'd like. So it's the Airport Advisory Board, Animal Control Board, that's set by ordinance, Building Trades Examining Board. This is a board, and I've highlighted these that are compliant with Florida state statute, and I've put the code in there for your reference. Same.
Where'd you put the code?
The Florida state statute code is in the
Oh, at the
highlighted
top,
area.
at the top. Thank you, Kelly.
Sure. Code Compliance Board, that's also compliant with Florida state statute. Community Development Block Grant Advisory Board. This is actually compliant with Volusia County. They're the ones that have this grant and have given each city the go-ahead to form their boards to comply with that. Community Engagement Enhancement Committee, formed by resolution, same as Economic Development Task Force. Fire Pension Board and the Police Pension Board they're both in compliance with Florida state statute. Historic Preservation Commission, the founding ordinances and the amended ordinance are listed, which are also in your packet. This board is actually in our code of ordinances defined. Housing Authority, that's compliant with the Florida state statutes. Personnel Board is compliant with the City of New Smyrna Beach policy and procedures. Planning and Zoning Board, compliant with Florida state statute. Police Pension Board. Turnbull Creek Land Preservation Committee, those are the resolutions, and the amended ones after this. This was actually formed and created due to a citizens' referendum that happened a few years ago. Utilities Commission, formed under the laws of Florida, and those are the chapters it references. Their Utilities Commission is also included in our Muni Code of Ordinances. Youth Council Task Force, that's the founding resolution and the amended. And like I said, we can go ahead and go back to that. I wanted to stress that in looking at all of these boards, our volunteers are enthusiastic citizens who want to dedicate their time, energies, and expertise to help those city, and for those reasons alone, that's why I wanted to bring all this information to you so you can work on creating the best path moving forward. So I'll caution after seeing that having too many advisory boards can unintentionally cause a negative effect. They should only be formed to serve a purpose and have well-established goals and objectives. It's crucial to examine each board's progress to determine if they should be sunset when they achieve their goals, because we do not want to throw a project and irrelevant duties their way to occupy their time. So there's always room for compromise, and in a sincere effort to balance the board economics, the supply and the demand of what we have, the following was concluded. I did speak with the department heads, and in speaking with them and those that serve as board managers, it was determined that there were no recommendations to sunset any of the meeting bodies. However, in an effort to best serve members in the community, it was communicated that a recurring problem is meeting too frequently, especially boards that are serving in an advisory capacity, which typically serve 4 times a year. When you have too many boards and they meet more than reasonably required, you'll begin to notice repeated presentations, duplication of duties, and unfortunately disinterested members causing a high turnover. So let me go here. That took me to the proposed direction. We need to determine what meeting bodies should be included in your review, explain procedures, and provide recommendations. And keep in mind, this is just my recommendation. You can do as you please, as you wish. So meeting body determination. These are the ones, these boards right here conform with Florida State Statute, Volusia County, or the City of New Smyrna Beach policies and procedures that should, in my opinion, remain as is to ensure compliance. These are Building Trade Examining Board, Code Compliance, Community Development Block Grant Advisory Board, Fire Pension, Police Pension, Housing Authority, Personnel Board, Planning and Zoning, and the Utilities Commission. Again, that's just my recommendation. The meeting bodies that could be subject to review right now are Airport Advisory Board, Animal Control Board, Community Engagement and Enhancement Committee, Economic Development Task Force, Historic Preservation Commission, Turnbull Creek Land Preservation Commission, and Youth Council Task Force. I went ahead and looked at all of these, and I'll have my recommendations at the end, but just so you know, that's how I split them up. And I determined that by the body type, the meeting type, and what they are governed under, which kind of policy, and how hard it would be to change that. So, let me see. I'm sorry, I lost my place. Just give me one moment. Before I get into procedures, I wanted to let you know that one of the things I've identified that I am extremely confident will serve the city and the meeting body members in a very positive way is an onboarding process that includes our very first ever board member guidebook. This is something that I've been working on in the background. This is a project I initiated and have been working on because I feel it is imperative to establish a sound structure within our boards. My idea is for each member to receive a copy as their onboarding process and welcome to the city. That guidebook, my plan for it is to define the meeting body types and member roles, outline the sunshine law, explain the types of decision each body is responsible for making, such as legislative, quasi-judicial, explain Florida State Statute open meeting law, including meeting notices, action minutes, and accessibility to those meetings. It will explain that the chair is the member that should serve as the liaison between city staff and meeting body members. It will also explain rules of decorum during meetings and list the organizational structure detailing the commission manager form of government, as boards are included in Section 1 of the city's policies procedure, so I felt that that was appropriate. I believe that it will greatly assist all involved by having a guidebook that explains these rules. If members have that, they can refer to it, and the desired outcome will be that all members share that same knowledge moving forward. So that being said, the procedures that our office does, how to apply for vacancy, the application fields that are included on the applications, and how we screen applications. So, how to apply, we have Granicus software. We have an app on that software called Boards and Commissions. They generate the application template for us. If we have any changes or anything, then we just contact them with that. So how citizens or anybody interested would do is visit our clerk's webpage, select the apply button, and complete the application. This might be too small to see, but these are the application fields, and I could come back to that and bring up a larger version of that a little bit later. Applicant screening. Staff verifies that the applicants meet the criteria: residency. I check the commissioner's own map, and if necessary, Volusia County Property Appraiser's website. I'll call the applicant to verify information if necessary. Per the State of Florida Library Division, their applications are retained on file for 3 calendar years, so I will or I'll have staff call those applicants when a vacancy arises to see if they're still interested in being considered for upcoming vacancies. Staff in the clerk's office takes each application at face value regarding honesty. The City Commission may contact applicants to verify community involvement, special interest, and may also contact those references. I say that because if, say you have a staff member and there's a question such as shared about the residency, I know that some of those applicants, like that one, had put that they lived in the city for 9 months. So it wouldn't be very prudent for me to call and say, you know, are you sure that you've lived here? So we remove ourselves from that side of the house. We just take those at face value. The recommendations I was referring to, I took the boards that I suggested could easily be tweaked, and after meeting with those department heads and board managers, added those recommendations, because that's what we were tasked to do. Not that you have to take them, but it's just something to consider for the Airport Advisory Board. It says here that in one of their sections in 3277, members must be resident of the city of New Smyrna Beach. And I wanted to add, out of the city of New Smyrna Beach, with special consideration to flight school students, hangar, leasers, aeronautical university students, instructors who do not meet the residency requirement. The reason being is because I know we've had a few applicants recently over the past couple of years that live outside of the city boundary, and they are very interested in serving on the board. They also might be affiliated with the airport in one of those capacities, so I feel like it's always worth considering people that have that knowledge that are outside of it, but it's not a recommendation that you would have to follow my advice on. It's just a way to broaden that pool for that board. Animal Control Board, there weren't any recommendations. Community Engagement and Enhancement Committee, I would suggest every other month to quarterly. Same as Economic Development Task Force, to meet as called upon to quarterly. And Turnbull Creek Land Preservation Commission changed to meet from meeting as needed to quarterly. I suggested that because of what I had mentioned before. We don't want to take especially a new board, have them meet every month, and then have them lose their purpose along the way. We want to keep them engaged and active and know that they have a purpose to serve going forward. And if we do that too often, then they're going to run out of material. And so I don't think that that would be in their best interest. There weren't any recommendations for the Youth Council. They actually just had an amended resolution increasing the board member size just last year. So, Historic Preservation Commission. If in any way possible, they could require that one member has shown a passion for historic preservation or has worked in an industry relating to historic preservation, but I also feel like that board should come up when we review Chapter 50 so that everything aligns and is cohesive. Let me see. Points to remember. Every current and past member was appointed by the City Commission. The City Commission can waive term limits, membership criteria, etc. Making it mandatory for applicants to submit resumes will decrease the number of applications we receive. I recommend allowing it to remain optional. We have a hard time right now recruiting volunteers, and I don't want to lessen that by mandating that they submit resumes, and be flexible with the membership criteria. Some meeting bodies may involve more than just the local community, and if criteria and qualifications are very specific and mandatory versus having an interest in, that will also make the applicant pool lower. So that concludes my presentation that I wanted to bring to you. Please keep in mind that each of those meeting bodies was adopted by our past and current commission in their best interest. So they went over, they reviewed it, they adopted it at that time that they felt those changes were best, either in the creation of or in amending those board standing resolutions or ordinances. So any changes and attempts to streamline verbiage or for optics' sake requires the city attorney's office to create an ordinance or resolution amendment to all of these boards. That being stated, I would recommend that only necessary changes are requested, and it's understood that the verbiage, criteria, goals, and objectives were previously adopted by a commission that decided that that specific criteria would serve the community in the best way possible at that time. So, of course, this is a workshop, so no official action can be made. However, you can identify the changes you desire and also select any meeting bodies that you'd like to discuss further, because this will help me in moving forward scheduling a special meeting to address those changes, and also request that the associated board manager and chair are present to provide further information to assist you in that decision-making process. So the easiest way to do this is to voice your request, perhaps, and ask for a consensus. If majority consensus is reached, I'll add it as part of the staff report to bring back to City Commission during that special meeting. And with all of that being said, I'm happy to go through these slides, and I ask Mayor Cleveland, he can now open the floor for commission comment and discussion.
Kelly, thank you for the very thorough report on each of the boards, and the preparation that you took is evident.
My pleasure.
Appreciate your advice. And we came to this by the passion of one of 5 of us here. The current vice mayor had some energy to make a change, and supported by several of us. And so maybe just to set up the dialogue, we'll start back with the vice mayor for a reference for why we're here and why it's important, and then we can go into either questions directly back to the city clerk, or a conversation, or a combination of the two. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Kelly and Mayor. We received a lot of good input from citizens this past week concerning boards, and I loved a lot of what they said, same sentiments that I had. Also, some of the things the public tonight said. I was on the Economic Development Board for 4 years prior to this board. So a lot of this, I have so much to talk about, so I don't know how we want to break this down. But I do have one question that's simple that you can answer, and this is going to kick the ball to the previous two commissioners that were here and voted on this. My first question is, why did the Economic Task Force, why did you guys vote on that going from an advisory board to a task force, and then we didn't have any meetings at all in a year, or over a year now? So I just want to know if you're happy with that decision, and what has that decision accomplished?
Anybody want to take that? Either of you?
My recollection serves me, that was the direction that the former mayor wanted to go in, to reduce some of these boards and then maybe redefine them. So we sunsetted a lot of those boards, and I think he even had an outside consult with somebody, and had some meetings and discussed maybe a different way to go than what we were going before when you were on the Economic Development Board. And then once we did that, I'm not sure why there was no further movement with that. I think there was a misunderstanding on how it was set up, and who was actually to take the lead on that. So that may have been why that fell through the cracks.
So,
Commissioner McGurk, go for it.
I agree with what Randy said. Former mayor took a lot of time to want to reorganize boards. Had some outside counsel on that. And here's what I recall. Some boards didn't need to meet all the time. Economic Development Board is probably one that was considered that, and that's why it was moved to a task force. I believe the mayor at the time stressed the idea of we would have boards that need to meet all the time due to the amount of material that they have to review. Let's say Planning and Zoning Board, Code Enforcement Board. Certain boards have material they have to meet on a regular basis. The idea behind moving certain boards to be a task force was when something came up, when something needed to be dealt with, when something, the community or the commission or staff felt something needed to be addressed, that would land on the table of that specific task force. And that specific task force would tackle that issue, as opposed to sitting around trying to drum up, talking a lot about, kind of like Kelly said. Economic Development Advisory Board is an interesting board. And it came about when the financial collapse happened, and there was no economic development in New Smyrna Beach or anywhere. So at the time, the current mayor in connection with the Chamber of Commerce felt it was critically important to set up that board. It actually acted more like a task force, if you think about it. Immediately tried to identify areas of low-hanging fruit that the city can go after. So when Adam set that up with the chamber, it actually acted more like one. And then, and ironically, New Smyrna was one of the cities in the entire county who came out of the financial collapse quicker and stronger than most cities. So I think the question of what to do with the EDA board has kind of lingered around probably the last 5 years, 6 years, as the economy has grown exponentially and done very well. And I think that we hear that from the members, and you were a member of. So it's interesting now you have that perspective. Maybe your perspective as a board member would be interesting to hear.
Thank you for that. Follow up real quick with that. Thank you for those. I didn't mean to point. But confusion on a lot of areas because from different resources that I've read, setting the meeting times came. One thing I read where it should come from the city manager, another thing I read should come from this commission board, and another thing I read it should come from the economic development or the economic director. It's confusing. And being on that board for 4 years, we would set strategic plans, present it to the commission board at the time you guys were on the board and others. We'd never get feedback on that. So it was really disturbing anyway. One of the things I'd like to see is better communication, better guidelines, and follow up on what the board has done. But we've got 18 boards or however many, and that is a lot. So being on that, this is kind of my baby because I've been able to see, the issues on both sides, and I'm excited to maybe make a difference to where the volunteers don't spend 4 years and feel like, what did that board do? Well, we didn't do anything. I don't want that to ever happen again while we're in office if we can help that. Because people's time is, very valuable. So I'd like to take this and just give an opportunity to go by section and look at all of these things coming from both sides. And I know a lot of you have been to all of the meetings, so you know some issues with the boards as well. And I really want to compliment the people out here that are on boards too. I mean, I know how hard they work. So I want to make this board recognize the boards that we have, help them tweak those to see where we can actually see the objectives, the accomplishments, and what we've done on a regular basis. And to have people quit because there wasn't a board meeting, that's not a good thing. So, and I know that happened. We had some resignations over this. So anyway, that's kind of my game plan, is to just go through by section and look at that. And we put some of the people off that are reappointments. And one of the things I got really upset about for reappointments, like on the Airport Advisory Board, you guys are reappointing these people, but you appointed them and we didn't in this board, so I don't know them. And some of the times we didn't get a resume attached because they're not required. And then to pick up the phone and call someone to ask them about things, I had to do my own research. And then sometimes I got information that, do I have to say this stuff in sunshine, about this person that's a volunteer that shouldn't even be on the board to begin with? It gets real complicated for us and messy. And I appreciate you guys taking this opportunity to discuss these issues, because the three of us are new and we don't want to step on your toes for appointing and doing things, but things do change, from, like the one gentleman said, 9 years could be one person being on one of these boards. It's a long time.
And Commissioner Martin.
We took I think, a different perspective and a more global one. And by the way, my memory of both the task force was that they weren't given any tasks, either of them, so there was no point in meeting. But my perspective on a global basis, went a little differently. I went through all the boards, and we have 4 of them that are controlled fundamentally by Florida statute, so I'm not recommending that we do a deep dive in there. We have 3 boards which were updated in the previous century. Airport was finished in 77, building trades 74, personnel board 84. I suspect since they were all documented in the previous century, we may want to take a look at those boards. Then we have 4 more that were updated over a decade ago. I've done a lot of reading the last couple of days on all of these, the compositions of the board, the setup of the board, resolutions versus ordinances. And to me, what I'd really like to see, again, this is globally, a framework for the groups. In other words, we have, just like any other application, what's the department associated? What's the purpose? What's the group composition? What constitutes quorum, terms and limits, and have that framework that would apply to all boards, task forces, advisories. But the big deal is things like accomplishment reports to the city commission. Most of these boards have no path to the city commission. We don't know what they do. They functionally operate in the dark, and we'd like to see what they're up to. And I think that would also give all of these volunteers a sense of accomplishment. But, and that we have things like the planning and zoning, which has so much embedded in it about the actual land development regulations, not a separate tidy little place where you go and read, this is what the planning and zoning board's qualifications, requirements are. So if we have a solid framework that we can plug in all of our boards and task forces, I think it would be a clearer, let everybody know what we expect from them, give them a path to the commission so that they can see their accomplishments, and it might be a neater way to go. We can go through each board individually, but I think we need a framework and then compare them against the framework.
Thank you, ma'am. That's good. Thank you so much. I have a few observations and comments as well. First, for the citizens that showed up here tonight and the citizens that are watching this at home, I too have read all of your emails and comments and appreciate the thoughtfulness and the passion and the expertise that many of you had with boards and commissions. So I appreciate that, and I think we should be listening to the citizens. To that end, I also believe that we should have an opportunity to learn from the serving board members that are here installed in their current positions on a recurrent basis, for sure, but maybe immediately before we make a move that we think we know what's going on. I know that many up here have served on a board or advisory prior, but I think getting that direct feedback, and sometimes it's painful to hear because it may be offensive. It may be indicting the city staff. It may be indicting our process. It may be indicting one of us. But I think we've got broad enough shoulders to be able to take those aboard. The complexity of how we do this is somehow by design. The city clerk handles the administration of each of the boards. Application, meeting announcements, minutes, etc. The content is generally owned by the city manager. In effect, down through a department head who is the steward of that board or commission. And so that mindset of what the task is for that board or panel is really controlled over here on this side. The administration's controlled over here, but the tasking of what's done is controlled over here. And so therein lies a little bit of the obscurity of how these things run. In my view, having sat here now for a year and watched from a distance for 8 years. And so imagine if you're hearing two different things. We've got the administrator over here saying, drumbeat, here's what you got to do, here's how to go. And the content department head, as fed from the city manager, saying, this is acceptable to touch, this is not acceptable to touch, here's the rule book. Here's what you're going to do. Here's how you can do it. Here's what's possible. And some department heads are up and want the help. They're ready to get the brilliant, wise, talented citizenry involved in a heartbeat. Others, maybe not so much, because what happens is it results in an extra assignment, more work, more tasking, and unearthing of real problems that may be worthy of going after, but you know, if you're up to here in the soup, you're not looking for new projects. So that is a concern to me. Commissioner McGurk has served on a P&Z years ago, and the P&Z doesn't have all of its requirements are written out, but none of the initiatives that are possible, the art of the possible. I'll give you one example. Many in our town know that our LDRs are aging and potentially out of date and may not serve our current needs. There's nothing in their P&Z rule book that says you must update the LDRs or make recommendations on that or interact with the staff. So it's kind of up to their goodwill and their interest in doing something more than what they're required to do. I happen to know that initiative was started years ago and by Commissioner McGurk, and it's a very tough thing to do. It's very hard to get traction in that area. And so I hear the citizens regularly complaining, you're out of date. Your rule book doesn't serve us anymore. Look at the growth we have. Look at what you allow. And we continue to say, we're going to execute, we're going to make them follow the rules. Well, we're going to make them follow the rules that are dated. So unless we have some initiative to update the rule book, we're going to get the same result. That's the process stuff that I talk about when I talk about process control. So that's just one, and I'm sure there are dozens. So I'm not sure the technique for how we go after this. I got to think about it a little bit, or we should collectively consider the path toward doing this. But simply tonight, going one board after the other and saying what we think up here with the wisdom that we have, just the five, may be premature. And I don't want to study this to death, but I sure would like the help of many others who have either been there before or are currently serving that say, hey, here are our hot spots. We've been serving for a few years. You notice that I always defer to our seniors, the guys that have been here before the three of us, to say, how did you get here? We don't want to undo what you did unless by considered thought, we absolutely want to undo it, but please tell us the path that you got here. I think there's something to be gained by doing that with each board or each panel that we have, and I'll yield.
I'm up.
Yes, sir.
On this commission, we spent a lot of time on boards, particularly in the last 2-3 years. The one thing that seems common is hard to find specific common ground. And that's not necessarily wrong. We have 5 different commissioners up here, and we all have the same constituency, some larger than others, all want input. And that's what we're here to do. We serve the people. But ask 10 people what color a house should be, and you're going to get at least 9 different opinions. I'm not sure what the goal accomplished tonight is, so I'm just going to make some brief comments on things that I've heard from Kelly and from the material, which may or may not have anything to do with what the direction that we want to take this. But I would recommend that anyone on a board or a committee or a task force is a resident. And the reason is because it's much bigger than a board. We have city limits. We have people who come to us who do not live in the city. We do not represent them. But when something happens, they come and they demand that we represent them because they identify as being in New Smyrna Beach. And we say many times, please come into the city. Oh, no, 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 I would never do that, but I want your representation. So you can go far as back as, whether or not we should be providing them water, sewer, electricity. If we give them everything that they need or want to be a city resident, but not actually be in the city, we've lost the incentive to bring them in. So I got a lot of friends who live outside the city, and they're always talking to me about it. But in terms of something, official capacity for the city, it's not saying that you can't go represent them. But if they're going to do something in the official capacity for the city, they need to be a resident making decisions for the city. On the application, I've seen it on, I've seen it off. I don't think there should be a party affiliation on the application. Too political, too cantankerous. Kelly, I like the idea of a handbook that everybody gets. I like that a lot. All of us get on boards, and we need to learn. That would be a big help to everybody, same as that I recommended that, and our legal staff does this. When I got on planning and zoning, I didn't meet with the legal department to have a discussion with the legal department to explain to me what my legal fiduciary responsibilities are. And we do that now. So anything we can do to help the new board members understand their role is fantastic. I would like to take a look at the Builders Trade Board. About the only one, I think, in a totally different way. Now, there may be, is our Builders Trade Board governed by a Florida statute or just our ordinance?
Ordinance 1074.
Is it a
There-
state statute or just an ordinance?
There's also a state statute.
Okay, so I'm not going to get into that right now because I'm going to meet with Carrie about the state statute requirements, and I'll probably bring that back at another time on how I think that we can make some changes to the Builders Trade Board. I think it's a kind of a board that's kind of sitting idle for a long time. And the biggest issue that I want to make tonight, that I feel strongest about, is this idea that you have to have some sort of qualification for a board. I think that's a slippery slope and dangerous to go down. Because I look at all of us and say none of us would have been able to serve on a board, particularly like the planning and zoning, from what I've been hearing in the circles. And now you're sitting here managing the planning and zoning board. So be careful with that. Anytime I look at an applicant, their history, their qualifications, what they've done in life, both work-related and non-work-related, their education, what their education is, always plays a role. But I think I'm hearing this drumbeat get a little too loud that we need these, quote, experts. And that itself comes with its own set of problems. So I like a diverse board. And I'll tell you, I want to make sure that I maintain a board of the people, a cross-section of the people. Because I have seen many people do very well without any kind of formal training or education in a particular field. I would not want only planners or engineers or PhDs on the Planning and Zoning Board. I don't think that's necessary, and I think we would lose a lot of valuable input from people. So qualifications is something that I think you tread very slowly on. Thank you, Mayor.
Sir. Thank you very much.
So I would agree with Jason on the qualification issues. I think if we get into requiring people to submit resumes, requiring them to be a certain field or expertise in an area, you're taking away from those people, those in the community that just truly want to be citizens and serve. The example I always use is Susan Nealon. She was an ordinary citizen. She got on Planning and Zoning Board. She took it to heart. She went in and she learned what she was supposed to do. She read all the land development regulations, and she was a very good member of that board for as long as she served. So you can have an ordinary citizen be on these boards You know, and not just because they have a title or letters after their name, but because they truly have a commitment to serve and volunteer and work on these things. When I was going through these, a lot of the things that I would like to see going forward is that we have some consistency. We have 3-year terms, we have 2-year terms, you know, term limits are 2 years, 3 years, you know, some have no term limits. I think that we need to be consistent in all of these boards in that, whether they're 3 years or 4 years, or, you know, and certainly no more than 2 terms. We can always override that if we have a lack of applicants, or we feel that we really have an excellent individual that's on that board who's doing a fantastic job, then we can override those term limits. But I think each one of them needs to have term limits. And I think the rest of these boards, we just need to be consistent in how they're written. Some of these are, you have to be a resident. Well, am I a resident of New Smyrna Beach? Or am I a resident in the city proper? Or because there's a small subdivision on South Glencoe that's in New Smyrna Beach, but it's actually in the city limits of Edgewater. So they're New Smyrna Beach residents, but they're in Edgewater city proper. And even like on the planning and zoning board, it says they have to be an elector. You know, I would stay away from the term elector. I think they just have to, you know, because then you're going to get in to people's private rights, what their personal opinions are and things like that. I think certainly they need to be a resident within the city limits of New Smyrna Beach. I think that certainly should be a qualifications going forward. I think I, for one, would, before we deal with the Utilities Commission, I would like to have some input from the Utilities Commission, especially if we have a workshop coming up in January. I think that would be a good time to say, hey, Mr. Bunch, hey, Utilities Commission board members, what do you feel the qualifications should be? Or what is it that you're looking for these board members to perform, and what kind of functions? I think that's an important, you know, it's a lot of old history back there, and I think, you know, Lisa and Valley were right. We need to update some of these things, and we have a better working relationship with them. So I certainly think some input from them on that particular board going forward. The Historic Preservation, we don't nominate them. They get nominated by the Southeast Volusia Historical Society. We don't even nominate them. They send us nominations for these boards. So, I mean, I think that's something that we need to look at, especially, I know that we're going to deal with Chapter 50 in the future. You know, when we deal with Chapter 50, we can also look at that, and then also, you know, how do we want to better define those qualifications? I think most of Kelly's recommendations I like. I think the only particular committee or board that would fall outside of the term limit issue would be the Youth Task Force, because we're looking for those high school students. So, you know, that's usually a 4-year, you know, high school, so we may have to deal with that. I certainly don't want to exclude somebody who gets in a sophomore year and then their senior year they have to come off a board, even though, you know, they've been doing a fantastic job. So I think looking at things like that, and certainly some of these boards have statutory requirements. I think we need to go back and review the statutes. Because I found one that's a little inconsistent with the way we're doing so, even though it references a statute. So I think we just need to go back and look at these. If we're going to reference a Florida statute or a Volusia County ordinance or something like that, we need to go back and review and make sure there hasn't been changes that we're not keeping updated with. But other than that, you know, I like the idea, and I think it's something to look at. You know, just my personal opinion is maybe we should stagger these. Maybe we should do some of them in March and some of them in November, so that all at once we're not doing all 19 boards, you know, at one time trying to fill positions. So however we work this out going forward, that we should stagger these so that some are, you know, in different periods of the calendar year, so that we're not inundated with all these applications and boards all at once. And we certainly can look at maybe a way that we can do that. to the fact about not knowing what the boards are doing, I'm not sure if it's in the charter or somewhere. These board chairs are supposed to be reporting to us annually. I know, not being done. Goes back to Valley. Well, whose fault is that? And who's that? So I think that's something that we need to work on and establish, who are we going to put ultimately responsible? And then if, he wants to delegate, then, or she wants to delegate, then that's certainly something to do. But we need to have that chain of command so that we know, when are these boards going to give us, their annual reports? We did 3 years ago. So it's something that's got lost when we changed the makeup of all the boards and sunsetted some of them. I think it just got kind of left behind and forgotten. So those were the things I'd like to see us do going forward. Not necessarily, we don't have to do them all at once. I certainly like Palmer's recommendation is that maybe we take one of them at a time or two of them at a time and maybe do a little bit more workshop with maybe even citizenry or something like that, especially the ones with the Utilities Commission. I think that's an important one to get their feedback. I think it would be, if we're going to continue with the Southeast Volusia Historical Society, I think we need to meet with them or a representative of that group and say, you guys are going to be nominating them. What do you use? What criteria do you use? And then, maybe we could incorporate that or, delete that altogether and change it altogether. So that's some of my comments and it's kind of personal feelings. That's it.
No, I just wanted to point out, listening to my fellow members of the commission, that we may all have different ideas of what to expect from the boards. And I was on 3 or 4 boards before I was on the commission, but I think of them as being working groups to help staff. But others, I think of them as being for the benefit of the residents, to have them feel that involvement in and movement in the city government. And I'm not saying either's right or wrong. I'm just saying if you're coming at it from different perspectives, it may be more difficult to get common ground. So that's it. And it's, again, a global perspective, not an individual board.
Thank you. Any other remarks? Lisa?
On the
Commissioner Martin, before you start, any other?
Again, I would think that, number one, we have to all establish, number one, priority, what do we want from any of these groups? And then number two would be what kind of framework, and then we can fit them in and establish right, wrong, and different. But unless we have a common goal from all of these groups, I think it's difficult to figure out how to move forward.
Very good, thank you.
My
Yes, ma'am.
apologies, I thought you kicked it to
No
me.
worries. Vice Mayor.
I love what you said about the qualifications. It's why we come from different backgrounds. We think of things differently, and you made very good points. I agree. It's like we all come from unique backgrounds up here, and none of us are the same. With the qualifications, the same, but here's the problem with it. To have none, when we're voting on the Utilities Commission Board and we only have 4 days to do it from the time the agenda comes out, and I happen to not even be able to get my agenda that week, so I had Monday to get a hold of Joe Bunch and see, this is a reappointment. Do you want this reappointed? That's not enough time. And I don't even know if they wanted it reappointed. So this stuff comes out on an agenda on Wednesday, and I don't know in advance that these reappointments are going to be on there. How do I know that these reappointments are going to be up? And I want to talk to Joe, Utilities Commission. I want to talk to Chris Edwards. Are these people doing their job? Are they? Kelly gives us an absence list, but that's it. Did they meet any objectives? Did they contribute did we meet our goals for this board? Do we have goals? You know, does Kelly set the goals? Does Cause set the goals, or does the director set the goals? So I keep asking these things, and I've been here for a year already up here. And I believe that, like Randy said, we really need to make this a part of our ongoing agenda. Sit at the end of the night just selecting a board member that, there was a gentleman made an example of, we had 27 to choose from. Do we want to keep that list for 3 years? You know, that's a big list. And then we get a new ones at the very last minute that squeak in, and we don't even know if they're citizens or not. We're taking their word for it. So our screening is limited. Is it okay as is? Do we trust this process? So, obviously 27 people that didn't get nominated are upset. I had a lot of phone calls last week because they weren't chosen, and I didn't get to even interview 27 people. And a lot of these were in 3 years ago. And so it's impossible. Sometimes we have thousands of pages to go through on our agenda, and now we have 27 people to choose for planning and zoning. We've got to figure out a better process. So, and I don't want it to be a popularity contest, but I don't want to make the qualifications so strict that we can't discern from. We had 3 or 4 people that spoke up here, and they gave great speeches. I made a comment, I want you guys, all of you, and that's how it is sometimes. We have very good candidates, and I love that they're volunteering for such a beautiful city that we have. It's amazing, and we volunteered, all of us, for previous boards, and that's why we're up here now. It's basically a volunteer job, in my opinion. We spend a lot of time doing a lot of research, and we wouldn't be up here if we didn't love our city. So I think there's a nice balance here. I don't want to point fingers at staff that they're not doing their job. I don't want to point fingers at us, because we didn't set a meeting. They didn't set a meeting. Kala didn't set a meeting. I don't understand who's doing what sometimes with this, because 3 different sources, it's just 3 different things. So I love that we can take this apart, dissect it. I think there's 2 or 3 things you mentioned. Should we have it been in the city? Absolutely. I strongly feel that they should live in the city limits. We could vote on things as we go, and in the next meeting on certain things we would allow. Meet with the historic Southeast and see what their recommendations are. I never thought of that. I think that's a brilliant idea. Go from there.
So let me muddy up something a little bit.
You want to go again, do you?
Well, it's a workshop. What I said, what I meant to say, I think may disagree with what Randy said. See, I'm saying I consider a resident someone who lives within the city limits and is, for lack of a better example, an elector. I think Randy's talking about something different, right? Or what do you?
No, I agree with you.
Okay.
I think they need to be in the city limits of
Voting
New Smyrna
member,
Beach.
a voting member.
But if you read the qualifications, it says you have to be a resident of New Smyrna Beach. So if you live in Samsula, you're a resident of New Smyrna Beach, but you're not in the city proper.
Got it.
Thank you.
So
Some of the
I misunderstood what
No,
you
yeah,
said.
No,
but
I
that's
agree with you.
perfect.
We need to change the language so it specifically says within the boundaries of New Smyrna Beach, or with,
Incorporated NSB,
Yeah.
which includes,
yes.
Yeah,
And
And then there needs to be, we need to have some way, so it hasn't been a problem, to my knowledge, that we have people who don't live in the city who are on boards. But the gentleman brought up a good point. we do need to make sure we have people in the city. Now, here's how complicated that gets. What's the definition of a resident? And when it comes to our jobs, politics, that is very difficult to answer. It's almost impossible to answer unless the state has a specific definition, which I don't think they do. You have a home in New Smyrna, you have a home in Ormond. Where do you sleep at night? I've had a home in, you got to be a resident of New Smyrna for 6 months to run for elected office, if I recall off the top of my head. Okay. Someone's had a home in New Smyrna, considers himself a resident in New Smyrna for 8 months, but their home has, for the last 20 years, been in Ormond Beach. But they say they live here. Nothing's changed. It gets complicated how to pin down and identify what is and prove someone is or is not living in a home and meeting the definition of how often, what is that definition? So I've seen that play out in a newspaper, and I'm using an example a few years ago that kind of played out with a city commissioner, and it had something to do with Ormond and maybe Port Orange or something like that. So it's a challenge. So if we're doing enough, that's great. I don't have an answer to that. I just know that it's a challenge, so it can become a problem.
We've handled the administrative side and administrative questions rather well. I haven't given the city manager an opportunity to talk at all yet about the perspective about the content, about his view about how the staff might view the boards, and he gets the direct feedback. So you want to set that table for a minute, sir? I think it'd be instructive for us.
Thank you, Mayor. And this is a very interesting discussion among the commission, and I really do appreciate that. But I think I have to go, and I have to say this. I think we have too many boards. Too many boards sometimes. I'm not sure if the productivity from the staff level or from the board is really adequate or at a point where you wanted to see it. So look how many boards do we have. I don't think I have enough department heads to cover these boards. So that's one. I think the discussion about, the qualification of the board, and that, I think that's a side note for me at this point. But the most important thing is to set the goals. And so you say, well, the city manager set the goals. Well, that might not line with most of the commission. Well, how about if the board set the goals? Well, the board might not go in line with the commission. My suggestion is, because that's probably the important part of any boards, it's to set the goals and the priorities. My suggestion would be, and that would be how I would do it, is I would go to the boards with the staff that we have a workshop with the board, set the goals and priorities for each board, bring it back to the commission and say, here's their priorities, and get the blessing from the commission. And then at that point, then you could have a plan of how you're going to accomplish this. But too many boards, I don't think it's going to be functional, and it's not going to be productive, because I have a quantity, but I don't have a quality. Being consistent with the boards, I think that's important as well. The report, I think we have some boards that they were reporting to the commission annually, and I think that has to be a requirement and a must, that they come back, whether it's by month, every 6 months or annually, to come back and report to the commission on their accomplishments and their goals and priorities. I agree with whoever said about going back to the Utilities Commission and check with them on the qualifications. I think Commissioner McGurk brought an important point. If you strict the qualifications, I think you're going to limit the people that they're going to be joining. And I remember 15 years ago, we will have a vacant position with some of the boards. We will not have any applicants. I think, right? I think we're getting spoiled that we have so many applicants in some of these boards. I think like the Planning and Zoning Board and some of the other, but some of the other boards, I remember the Building Trade Board, we have to go and search for people to actually be on the board. And staggering the boards, I think that's a good idea as well. I think that's something, this way you don't have 19 boards to be at the same time. Being a city residence, I think that's important, but in some of these boards, you have a businessman that might be on the board. You know, I remember the CRA, when we had the CRA, that wasn't the commission, the CRA board. They were some of the members that they are business owners in the CRA district. So that's something to look at, like, for example, the airports board, maybe the parking task force. Some of these boards, you might not have a residence that could be on that board. But I think the most important thing is to have the workshop with the boards, set the goals and priorities, and bring it back to the commission for the commission to give them, whether they say, well, we agree with on 5 of them, or we agree on all of them, and here we want you to add this to it. Right now, currently, our staff are working on some of these issues that you already have brought up. For example, the LDR. We're going back and trying to revise and modify some of these sections in the LDR that date back, you know, several years ago. So we're trying to get up to the new system, new technology that it's up there. You know, I could give you, for example, on the turf. Right now, the turf is being used all over the place, and we don't have anything in our code to address the turf, artificial turf. So that's something we include. The landscaping. Some of these issues that happen, as you know, from some of these infill homes that we have. So that's something we're trying to address. But I think we have to go back, and I have to go back and come back to you with some of these boards that I'm not sure if we could combine them. I know we tried to combine some of these boards, but we still have, I think, too many boards to handle, and I don't think the staff level don't have that many staff. I mean, you look at our schedule, like, for example, Vice Mayor, and I agree with her. She's getting 4 days before, but look how our meetings are. We get our meeting, by the time we finish, we're working on the next agenda, and it's not easy to get the agenda done and get it out. But we have to come up with something to give you enough time, especially on these appointments, that you got some maybe 2 weeks to see if we could give you maybe in advance some of these applications that you could review. But that's what I got, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before I go through my significant list, is there a legal lens that you'd like to share with us about anything you've heard tonight that we should either absolutely, in your opinion, embrace or stay away from?
For the boards that have specific requirements, I think adding additional requirements on top of that is going to make your pool of applicants much slimmer. So I wouldn't recommend, you know, on those specific boards where they do have a requirement for, you know, an architect, a builder, or, you know, certain trades, that we don't add additional qualifications to those.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. Okay, a couple of...
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
So along with what you and Valley just talked about, I think we can devise a procedure. If we're going to have planning and zoning board appointments in March, you know, by the 1st of March, we should have all the applicants, and then we can vote on them at the last meeting in March. Something like that. You follow me? And that way, we have time to digest. You can close the application, you know, the application deadline is March 1st. You know, the commission will vote on these applicants at the last meeting in March, and that gives us more time to review some of these and actually get into them. You know, I agree. You get them the Wednesday before, you know, with everything else and trying to go through, you know, our meeting and things like that. Sometimes that's maybe the last thing that we look at, and probably should be the first thing that we look at. So I think if we, as a procedure, come up with a procedure where we can do something and give us, you know, give us more time, and also would give Kelly more time to kind of work on that. If she knew that these 5 boards were going to be up in March, and she could prepare ahead of the time for that, and she could just submit it to us. It didn't necessarily have to be on the agenda. She could just let us know, hey, you know, the end of March, you're going to be voting on this. Here's my applicants so far, and, you know, it'd be on the agenda.
Yes, ma'am.
I continue to be struck, but I don't know how to determine qualifications if I don't know the purpose of the board. I don't know the purpose of the board unless I know it's to take care of staff or department requirements, or is it to take care of residents? So how do I determine process or qualifications until I understand purpose? And so I'm not disagreeing with anything or anybody, but when it comes to qualifications, if Chris Edwards needs somebody to help on a specific economic problem, that is different from a resident who may be impacted by that economic process. So which are we trying to take care of? Are we trying to help staff solve certain problems, or are we trying to help residents? And how do we determine the qualifications until we determine that purpose?
I understand what you said. I may have an answer for you.
Well, most of these boards are advisory in nature, so they're not helping staff. Staff's already made their presentation. and
Why are we
staff-
assuming that we are retaining the boards exactly as they are now? Some of these boards have not been looked at since 74. I mean, why aren't we questioning each of the boards and asking the purpose of each of the board and whether or not we should retain it?
I think that was, Colin made that point, is
Yeah.
he's going to go back and meet with them and talk about qualifications and things like that. But to your point, I don't think that these boards are helping staff. Staff are paid professionals that should be doing their job. These are going to be these boards should be advisory to us based on how they see it, how they perceive it, what the public has been to, has advised them of. And I think they're going to be more, we're looking for staff's recommendations because that's it. These boards are advisory in nature and going to help staff make their recommendation to us, not come directly to us.
And I'm going to say again, I'm going to guess all 5 of us, 6, 7, 8 of us may all have different, 9 of us, different concepts of what any and all of the boards should be. And I'm suggesting that perhaps we need to find common ground on something before we have everybody in staff running around trying to meet the needs.
And let me,
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
so I can agree and disagree with what Randy just said. One of our problems, depending on the board, if it's simply an informational board, that's great. But one of our problems on planning and zoning is you have a legal responsibility to follow the law. So what happens is we get personal comments from planning and zoning members about how they feel it should be, which is sometimes contrary to what the law is. And I'm not sure they fully understand that because they get very upset when we go along with staff and have to follow the law. So I don't want to feed into that problem and compound the problem without that person knowing that their recommendation to us is not legal.
Wait a minute, do you know that it's so long since planning and zoning has been updated, there are requirements for a city postmaster discussion in the planning and zoning.
I understand, but that doesn't stop the fact that there's the legal fiduciary responsibility for a planning and zoning member to make recommendations consistent with what the law is. Now, that's not the same for other boards.
But wait a minute, how do they do that if we no longer have a city postmaster?
I don't need a city postmaster with it when I have a city attorney sitting in a room advising them.
I'm telling you that there is specific requirement in the planning and zoning board job to have a sign-off from the city postmaster. Maybe it needs to be updated. They
Okay,
can't abide.
Right, maybe, I don't know what you're referencing, but
Line
certainly it sounds
265,
outdated.
Line 265 in
Yeah.
our,
So,
Yeah.
so let us examine that. What, if you're watching, if you're still in the crowd or you're watching from home, what you're watching is your government at work here with different lenses of how we look at things. And whether you're the city manager, the city clerk, the city attorney, or any of the five of us, the beauty of that is it will eventually form a very strong tapestry. In the meantime, it looks like chaos. So let me try to work our way through that for a second. Surely there would be a governing document, if not today, a governing document with a purpose statement, and some of them are statutorily written as by state code, which the city clerk has detailed. But maybe that's not enough. Maybe there needs to be a document. Part of your handbook could be, here, you're on this board, you need to learn these things. And it's a purposeful guidance of your purpose is advisory, your purpose is legal, your purpose is statutorily. All of those things in a seminal document would help any of us or any of the citizens get up and know what they were doing before they got out there. It would help Commissioner Martin say at the end of the day, what did you do, why did you do it, and what is the purpose of your group? I favor a seminal document for guidance for each board. So, with that as the path forward for both sides here, and it's hysterical that there's something about a postmaster. I love that idea. The diversity is a strength.
You know, Mayor, let me
Yes, sir.
just about the postmaster.
Yeah.
I think the postmaster used to be one of the people that they have to sign on a site plan for the mailboxes.
Yeah.
Because when we have a subdivision, the mailboxes, whether you have a gang mailbox or the mailbox has to be
Sure.
set at a certain level in a certain location. So I remember we used to have a stamp that you stamped the site plan with, and the postmaster was one of the people to sign off on the site plan that we have.
it also includes a requirement for the city horticulturalist to
Yes,
sign off.
that's right.
And it's my point that the process should be separate from the definition of that group, of the Planning and Zoning Board, should not include the discussion of whether or not the city horticulturalist has signed off on a site plan.
So, Mr. Rashid, you're demonstrating your years of service, and you know where we have come from, and I'm grateful to know that history. I would not have known that had you not said that. It makes total sense. Commissioner Martin is talking about somewhat of what appears to be the absurdity of certain things that are in now in 2023 that weren't as they were when that was formed, and the desire and I think a dire need to review all of these with the seminal document that we will pound out after staff proposes something. We will argue our way through that at this juncture right here. So back to diversity being a strength. I certainly agree with that. We can't have all PhD Susan Nealon, professional scientific researcher who may masquerade as a citizen, but she is a professional scientific research scientist. And so she does have certain skills that many do not, of how to pick things up quickly. Do we need all PhDs? Absolutely not. The tapestry of diversity will make us stronger than the one-sided view of somebody who is either very skilled or none of which. We can't have all neophytes. We must have some skill levels buried in there for sure. I think the reporting period, of these organizations the periodicity of that should be different. They don't all have to be uniform. What's hot and what's not. I think P&Z is always going to be hot. I think that economic development for now is hot. Commissioner McGurk described when it was not and when it raged and when we needed to have it. Right now we talk about 90% of the ad valorem tax rate coming from citizens, 10% or less coming from businesses. We need to pump up the businesses. So maybe for a season, we have the periodicity adjusted. the staggering that Commissioner Hartman brought up. This is an elephant. We must eat it a bite at a time. So whether we do 2 or 3 and we figure out that, staff, please propose what that stagger looks like. And at the insistence to get something done and not just talk about it, let us do that in earnest and get started first of the year with some meaty ones. And if we decide some of the boards need to go away following both of your advices, so be it. We'll get rid of them. I'd love to tell you I prioritize these, but I wrote them all down by your comments as they came up. I think we may have a bigger challenge than we know. The application process isn't what's keeping people from applying to these boards. It's what they're told by others that are serving on their boards, by what they're able to do and how valuable they feel as a member of these boards. In other words, don't waste my time. My opinion is you'll get one chance with the real talent out there to get it right and to make their time meaningful. After that, they will slowly fade in the sunset, and they will talk to 10 other people that says, don't waste your time. So I think we get one chance to get that right, or a renewal as this commission. Each board should get a voice before us, and not once a year in an annual report. They should come periodically. I don't know what that period is, but it's too late after we let them go for a year, wandering in the wrong direction, or our opinion of the wrong direction. So I think they should be at least twice a year, and there may be a case for some to be even more frequent. The good news is we've given you a lot tonight, and potentially between the 3 charter officers, you can come up and report back on what you heard, what you think we would like you to do, and we can critique that at the next opportunity that we're here together, so that we are very clear about where we want you spending your valuable time and the staff's time, and where we do not. I think that might be helpful. And those are my remarks. Are there any follow-up before we turn it back over to the city clerk? Any follow-ups? Seeing none. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I think it's a good time to share, because I've heard a lot of comments. We do, as a city, have a guidebook that we follow. It was adopted actually by the voters and the public in our charter as our form of government, which is the commissioner-manager form.
You got that.
And so when we do that, one of the largest benefits in that form of government, it encourages neighborhood input into the political processes via public participation and also volunteering on boards. So that's very important to remember. We want our citizens to be included in that, and there were several comments about having the citizens included in decisions going forward or meetings going forward, which I think is excellent, because after all, they're the ones that went ahead and voted that form of government into our charter. So that was one thing. In that proposed board book, I was going to list a requirement to submit an annual report. If further than that, if more than that, that's fine. Also, whatever your pleasure is, but it will be available online for public viewing as part of those agenda packets as well, so the public will be able to have access to it. That was part of the plan. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, and also just let you know there was some concerns about the duties and the meeting frequency. When we are establishing a new board and that's brought to commission, those are listed in the ordinance or resolutions as different sections. So when the governing body, which would be commission, decides to adopt the resolution or ordinance, then you guys are going ahead and setting the policy. It goes to city staff, Colin, all of us to carry out that policy. So that's how that division is in the commission manager form of government. So I just wanted to take an opportunity to explain.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder. I think you give that to us regularly, and we've got that loud and clear, all right? Okay. So the other piece I might remind you is that we are elected by the people, and they want to talk to us all the time. Some of them may not feel like they can come talk to you. even though you're the most delightful person in the world, as is the city manager and city attorney. And so they enjoy talking to the people that they put in. And when they don't like what we have to do or say, they'll get rid of us, and that's fine too. But you have done a great job in making folks feel comfortable and welcoming to come into your office. A day doesn't pass when I don't hear a compliment about the city clerk's office has been so helpful and over the top. Just understand that some of them just want to talk to the folks they voted on, and they think that that's a value. So I welcome that. The reminders about the form of government, I think we got that. I think we understand that. You guys are the policies up here, and you guys are the implementers, and that's helpful. Anything else, Chris, from anyone? Yes, sir.
Mayor, I think what we'll do is we'll come back with the report of the understanding out of this meeting based on the procedure, the selection, and everything that we talked about. I'm going to bring it back to you just so this way we're all on the same page so we won't miss anything. And then from that point on, we'll move forward with what's come up some of these recommendations that we have tonight.
As long as we have the opportunity to say, we like the periodicity, or we like the speed, or we don't like the speed, speed it up. We want that opportunity to come back and say, hey, I know you got a lot on your plate. God knows you guys do. But we think this is a higher priority. Please, go faster. Or, hey, we can't take any more. I know these meetings during the holiday season is a burden to many. And so I'm grateful for my colleagues for coming here on Thanksgiving week. We have several meetings during Christmas time frame. And so I appreciate you going easy on us for the holidays, and let us study and think about what we need to do in the new year.
Very good. Thank you.
With that, we're adjourned.